Nobody expected a football match to turn into a referendum on American power. But that is exactly what happened on the night Argentina faced Cabo Verde at Hard Rock Stadium. What started as a feel-good underdog story ended with players in tears, fans screaming robbery, and a growing chorus of voices asking whether this World Cup was ever designed to let a small nation win. By the time the final whistle blew, the score read 3-2 in favor of the defending champions, but almost nobody was talking about the goals. They were talking about the whistle. Let's start with who Cabo Verde actually is, because most casual fans had never heard of this country before this tournament. Cabo Verde is a small island nation off the west coast of Africa, a collection of volcanic islands with a population smaller than a mid-sized American city. This was the first time in the country's history that its national team had ever qualified for a World Cup. For years, Cabo Verde was the kind of opponent bigger nations scheduled just to pad their goal difference, a name on a fixture list rather than a genuine threat. Players trained on cracked pitches with hand-me-down gear without the sports science, the medical staff, or the sponsorship money that wealthier federations take for granted. When qualification finally came, it was treated as a national holiday, and the team arrived in the United States as the sentimental favorite of neutral fans everywhere. Nobody, including Lionel Messi and his Argentine teammates, expected what happened over the next 2 hours in Miami. From the opening minutes, Cabo Verde played like a team with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Their backline packed itself into a wall, closing every passing lane and forcing the reigning champions into low-percentage shots from distance. In midfield, the Islanders won duel after duel, sprinting into channels that Argentina's tired legs simply could not cover. By halftime, the stadium had shifted allegiance. Fans who had come to cheer for Messi found themselves chanting the name of a country most of them had never heard of a year earlier. For a little while, it genuinely felt like the tournament was about to produce one of the greatest upsets in World Cup history. Then, everything changed in an instant. Most fans will not forget. Cabo Verde broke forward on the counterattack, and the ball ended up in the back of Argentina's net, or so it appeared to everyone in the stadium. The celebration lasted only a few seconds before the referee raised his hand and pointed toward the video review monitor. What followed was several minutes of confusion, silence, and finally a decision that reversed the goal. Slow motion replays shown afterward on television did not offer the kind of obvious, undeniable evidence that usually accompanies a reversed call. Many pundits watching from the studio said plainly that had the same passage of play happened in reverse, with Argentina attacking Cabo Verde's goal, it is difficult to imagine the same goal being wiped off the board. That is not a proven fact. It is an opinion shared widely across social media and by several former players working as television analysts, but it captures exactly why this decision detonated online within minutes. If that had been the only questionable moment of the night, this story might have faded quickly. It was not. Deep into the closing stages, with Cabo Verde still somehow level on the scoreboard and playing with the kind of fearless energy that had already stunned the football world, an Argentine attacker went down near the edge of the penalty area. Replays showed minimal contact, the kind of touch that in a normal match draws little more than a play-on signal from the referee. Instead, the referee sprinted in, awarded a dangerous free kick, and pulled a straight red card on Cabo Verde's most important defender. In a single call, the team that had fought for decades just to reach this stage was reduced to 10 men in the tournament's most pressure-filled moment. Argentina eventually won in extra time, with Lisandro Martinez heading home a dramatic late goal and an unfortunate own goal from Cabo Verde defender Dine Borges, sealing the 3-2 scoreline. Messi's earlier strike in the first half had kept Argentina in the match before the officiating controversy took center stage. Whether this was, as some fans allege online, a case of the tournament being tilted toward its biggest stars, or simply a run of harsh calls in a chaotic, high-pressure match remains a matter of genuine dispute. FIFA has not issued any statement suggesting wrongdoing, and no formal complaint from the Cabo Verdean Federation has been confirmed publicly as of this week. What is confirmed is that this was far from the only officiating storm to hit the tournament this summer, and that pattern is exactly what has fans and federations furious. Just weeks earlier, Brazil's Football Confederation filed a formal written complaint with FIFA President Gianni Infantino after a goal by Vinicius Junior was ruled out following a video review during a group stage win over Scotland. The Brazilian Federation argued the intervention did not meet the required threshold of a clear and obvious error, and it specifically asked that the match official be barred from any future Brazil fixtures, citing what it called a pattern of inconsistent decisions stretching back to a disputed call at the 2018 World Cup. Brazil went on to win that match comfortably regardless, but the complaint shows just how deep suspicion of the video review system runs among the very federations competing for the trophy. The officiating drama did not stop there either. In the opening match of the tournament between South Africa and Mexico, 3 players were sent off, the highest number of red cards shown in a single World Cup match in roughly 2 decades. Then came an incident involving an Australian video assistant referee who was filmed making a hand gesture during a broadcast that anti-hate organizations have identified as being associated with white supremacist symbolism. The organization FAIR, which monitors discrimination in football, publicly called on FIFA to remove the official from future matches, though FIFA itself had not issued a public response to that specific allegation as of this week. But the controversies swirling around this World Cup go far beyond the referees, and this is where the story stops being just about football. This tournament is the first World Cup held on American soil since President Trump returned to office, and his administration's aggressive immigration enforcement campaign has cast a shadow over the entire event. According to figures compiled by Human Rights Watch, immigration and customs enforcement agents made more than 167,000 arrests in the metropolitan areas surrounding the 11 American host cities in roughly the 14 months leading into the tournament. Human rights organizations, along with more than 120 advocacy groups, issued a joint travel advisory earlier this year, warning visiting fans, particularly those from immigrant communities and minority backgrounds, about the risk of detention, aggressive searches, or deportation simply for attending matches. Those warnings were not merely theoretical. Advocacy groups have pointed to a case from the previous year's Club World Cup in which a father seeking asylum was detained by immigration agents after bringing his 2 children to a match at the very same New Jersey stadium that will host this year's World Cup final. Roughly a quarter of the nations competing in this tournament have citizens facing some form of travel restriction or heightened visa scrutiny tied to the current administration's policies, according to reporting compiled by multiple outlets tracking the issue throughout the spring. One especially striking case involved a referee from Somalia who was turned away at Miami International Airport by border officials despite holding valid credentials to officiate at the tournament, with authorities citing unspecified vetting concerns. He returned home to a hero's welcome from thousands of supporters and has said he intends to try again for the next World Cup, scheduled to be co-hosted by Spain, Portugal, and Morocco in 2030. Civil liberties groups and fan organizations across Europe, including at least one prominent English supporters group, have said publicly that they will keep a lower profile at matches this summer, specifically because of concerns about how immigration enforcement is being carried out around the tournament. Even American public opinion appears sharply split on the role immigration authorities should play at World Cup venues. A poll conducted by a major American newspaper in partnership with a university research center found that roughly 2 out of every 3 American adults surveyed opposed having immigration enforcement agents stationed inside stadiums during matches, with opposition running just as high among self-identified football fans as among the general public. Federal officials have maintained that any enforcement presence around the tournament is focused on serious crimes such as human trafficking and counterfeit goods rather than routine immigration sweeps, though that assurance has done little to calm nerves among visiting fans and advocacy organizations, who continue pushing FIFA to negotiate what they are calling an enforcement truce, covering all official tournament venues and fan zones for the remainder of the competition. Ticket pricing has added another layer of frustration to an already tense atmosphere. The cheapest available tickets for group stage matches this year started at roughly $140, more than double the starting price at the previous World Cup in Qatar. Prices for marquee matches climbed dramatically higher, with reports indicating that tickets for the July 19th final at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey were initially listed around $8,600 before climbing past $10,000 and eventually being advertised near $33,000 on secondary markets as demand intensified. FIFA has pointed to record-breaking sales, reporting more than 6 million tickets sold across the tournament, even as images of visibly empty sections during some early matches circulated widely online. FIFA's official explanation attributed the gaps to fans lingering in concourse areas rather than sitting in their assigned seats, a response that many supporters online found unconvincing given the price tags involved. Adding to the sense that politics and football have become impossible to separate this summer, President Trump is expected to personally attend the tournament final on July 19th and present the trophy to the winning captain, according to comments made by FIFA President Gianni Infantino in a television interview earlier this summer. Infantino, who has cultivated a notably close public relationship with the American president since before the tournament began, said the two men would watch the final together before the trophy presentation. Critics of the arrangement argue it symbolizes exactly the blending of sport and politics that has defined this World Cup from the very start, while supporters of the president say his attendance simply reflects the significance of hosting the world's biggest sporting event on American soil. Back on the pitch, none of this context erases the raw emotion of what Cabo Verde's players experienced walking off that field in Miami. These were amateur strength budgets going toe-to-toe with one of the greatest teams ever assembled, and for most of 2 hours, they made the champions of the world look genuinely rattled. Whether the two contentious calls that swung the match were the product of bad luck, human error under pressure, or something more troubling about how officiating is being managed at the highest levels of the sport is a question that fans, pundits, and now entire national federations are asking openly. Cabo Verde's federation has not filed any official protest as of this week, but social media reaction in the days since the match has remained overwhelmingly sympathetic to the Islanders, with hashtags referencing the disallowed goal and the red card trending across multiple platforms well into the following week. For a nation that had never before tasted World Cup football, the elimination stings, but it does not erase what they built. Cabo Verde arrived in the United States as a footnote and left as a story that will be told for years, a reminder that even in a tournament increasingly shaped by billion-dollar broadcast deals, government politics, and video review controversies, 11 players from a tiny island nation can still make the entire footballing world stop and pay attention, even if only for 90 unforgettable minutes before the whistle changed everything. Argentina now moves on to the round of 16, carrying both the relief of survival and the weight of a result that many outside their own fan base still view with suspicion. Whether that suspicion is fair or simply the natural byproduct of an upset that almost happened, one thing is clear heading into the tournament's final stretch. This World Cup, held across the United States, Mexico, and Canada under the shadow of the Trump administration's immigration policies, record ticket prices, and a string of contested officiating decisions, has become as much a story about power, money, and politics as it is about the sport itself. There is also a broader financial and diplomatic story running underneath all of this, one that rarely gets mentioned during match broadcasts but shapes almost every decision FIFA makes. This tournament expanded from 32 teams to 48, a change pushed through years ago specifically to grow the pool of countries, with a stake in tuning in, buying tickets, and purchasing broadcast packages. Cabo Verde's presence in the field at all is partly a direct product of that expansion, since a 48-team format created qualification pathways for African nations that would never have existed under the old system. In that sense, the very story fans found so emotionally powerful, a tiny island nation reaching the World Cup for the first time, is itself a byproduct of FIFA's commercial strategy, even if the courage the players showed on the pitch was entirely their own. That expansion has not been universally popular. Critics inside the sport, including several retired players turned television analysts, have argued publicly that a larger tournament dilutes quality in the group stages and creates more mismatches, while defenders of the format point to nights exactly like the Argentina versus Cabo Verde match as proof that smaller footballing nations deserve their moment on the biggest stage. Both arguments were on full display in the days following this particular match, with pundits split between celebrating Cabo Verde's performance and questioning whether expansion has simply created more opportunities for exactly the kind of officiating chaos fans are now furious about. Environmental groups have also raised concerns about a tournament spread across 3 countries and 16 host cities, arguing that the sheer scale of air travel required for teams, staff, and fans undercuts FIFA's own stated sustainability commitments. FIFA has defended the format by pointing to economic benefits for host communities, though independent economists in several host cities have pushed back on official projections, noting that previous mega events, including past Olympic Games and World Cups, have frequently fallen short of promised local economic gains once the final whistle blows and the cameras move on. None of these bigger picture debates were on the minds of the Cabo Verdean players as they walked off the pitch in Miami, of course. For them, the tournament experience was intensely personal, built on years of makeshift training conditions and matches played in front of a fraction of the crowds their opponents were used to. Cabo Verdean football officials have spoken in the past about players juggling day jobs alongside international duty, a stark contrast to the multi-million-dollar contracts enjoyed by most of Argentina's starting lineup. That contrast is part of why the match resonated so strongly with neutral fans and why the contested calls late in the game felt, to many watching, like more than just bad luck. Argentina's players have said comparatively little publicly about the controversy, focusing instead on their advancement in the tournament. Head coach Lionel Scaloni acknowledged after the match that Cabo Verde had made life difficult for his team throughout the 90 minutes and into extra time, praising the underdogs for their organization and physical intensity without directly addressing the disputed officiating decisions. Messi, for his part, has largely let his performance speak for itself, scoring in the first half before the match tightened into the tense, error-strewn contest that ultimately required extra time to settle. Looking ahead, Argentina will need to regroup quickly, since the round of 16 brings no shortage of dangerous opponents, and even less room for the kind of late tournament fatigue that showed itself so clearly against Cabo Verde. Whether the defending champions can shake off the criticism and questions swirling around their path through the knockout rounds remains to be seen, but for now, the story of this World Cup is not just about who wins, it is about the mounting list of questions surrounding how those wins are decided, who gets to attend safely, and what role politics continues to play in a tournament that was supposed to belong entirely to the sport itself. There is one more thread worth pulling on before this story closes, and it involves the growing debate over whether video review technology has made officiating more accurate or simply more visible in its failures. Before the video assistant referee system existed, a blown call like the one that erased Cabo Verde's apparent goal would have been debated in newspapers and sports bars for a few days and then largely forgotten. Now, every contentious decision gets dissected frame by frame within minutes, replayed endlessly across social media, and picked apart by millions of viewers, with instant access to the same camera angles the officials themselves are using. Some analysts argue this scrutiny has actually made the sport fairer over time by catching mistakes that used to slip through entirely unnoticed. Others insist the system has simply replaced one set of human errors with another, since the same subjective judgment calls that always existed on the pitch are now being made by different officials sitting in a review booth instead. That tension sits at the heart of almost every major controversy from this tournament. From the disallowed Vinicius Junior goal in the Brazil match to the reverse call against Cabo Verde. In both cases, the technology worked exactly as designed, flagging a moment for human review, but the final judgment still came down to an official's interpretation of a fast-moving physical sport, where contact is constant and rarely black and white. FIFA has defended its video review protocols throughout the tournament, insisting that the system is applied consistently across every match, regardless of which teams are involved, though that defense has done little to quiet fans who feel, rightly or wrongly, that decisions seem to break more often in favor of the sport's biggest commercial draws. Cabo Verde's federation, for its part, has struck a notably gracious public tone since the elimination, thanking fans around the world for their support and calling the tournament run the proudest achievement in the country's football history, regardless of how it ended. Several players have given interviews describing the experience of playing in front of a full American stadium as something they could not have imagined a decade earlier when the national team trained without so much as a proper equipment budget. That perspective has not stopped supporters online from continuing to relitigate the officiating decisions, but it has added a layer of dignity to how the team's exit is being remembered just days after the final whistle. As the tournament rolls into its knockout rounds, the questions raised by this single match are unlikely to fade quietly. Fans, federations, and media organizations covering the World Cup are all watching closely to see whether similarly contentious calls emerge in the remaining matches and whether FIFA faces any real pressure to explain its officiating decisions in detail rather than issuing brief general statements defending the process. For a tournament already contending with immigration controversies, record ticket prices, and intense political scrutiny surrounding the American host government, another wave of refereeing disputes is the last thing organizers wanted heading into the business end of the competition. Whether this World Cup will ultimately be remembered for its football or for everything swirling around it may not be clear until the final whistle blows in New Jersey on July 19th.